Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, April 28th, 2026 at 5 p.m. I'm calling the Grand Chute Special Town Board meeting to order. Can I have the roll call, please?
Haling,
Here.
Daly. Here. Blair.
Here.
Gehring.
Here.
English.
Here. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get approval of the agenda and order of the day?
Gehring moves approval of the agenda in order of the day.
Blair seconds.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there any public input?
There's none.
Then the new business is a presentation by Corey Porras-Plash from CP2 Consulting Incorporated about our strategic plan. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And you nailed the name. Nicely done.
Thank you.
There's a lot to it, so I will go ahead and wait for everything to get switched over, and then I will go ahead and start. A little bit of a preface with this. This is your information, so I will be pausing at some places, but also too, if there's a question that you have, feel free to wave me down, and I'm happy to stop and explain everything as we go. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I should be recording okay. I can hear myself in the background, so we're going to go ahead and go. So a little bit about me, because I have not met most of you before. I actually started my career as a 911 dispatcher and worked my way up in local government. Since then, I've spent time as Vice President of Mission-Driven Tech Startup. If you've ever heard of the National Community Survey, I worked at the company that did that. I also worked at the Alliance for Innovation. I was the Executive Director of the Wisconsin City County Management. Pretty much in a nutshell, I have spent my career either in local government or serving local government. So I joke that I see cinder block walls and I get really excited. But local government to me is where so many of the important things happen. When I was going to grad school, my daughter said, what are you doing? Because the whole idea of going to school if you didn't have to, why would you do that? And I said, when you go into the bathroom in the morning to brush your teeth, you turn on the faucet and water comes out? She said, yeah. I said, I can help make that happen. So I really do appreciate the time and the service that everyone here puts into making that happen as well. With that, let's go ahead and jump in. So we're going to go through the survey results first. So the survey was open between July and August of last year. So a little over, well, I guess it's been quite a while now. But generally survey information, unless there is something drastic that happens, usually tends to be considered to be pretty evergreen for at least a year or so, unless there's some significant changes. So who did we hear from? We heard from 94% of the people who identified themselves as residents, which is good. That's who we wanted to hear from. 63% of them said that they were homeowners. This was a little bit unusual. Usually the women have it. In Grand Chute, more men than women answered the survey. We also had 5% that chose not to answer. That might be that might be impacting that. I did not see this. I looked at the rest of the information. One of the things that I look for is anything that looks several results that don't seem to be quite right. I look at the data on the back end. This was the only thing that was at all out of the ordinary. So I feel like the survey results that we're looking at today, I didn't see any results in there. It seemed to be any efforts to sway the information, anything like that. What is your age? This is actually pretty typical. We see kind of that curve to it, especially if we've got an older population. People a lot of times assume that we don't hear from our older residents. That's actually not true. We tend to actually hear really good response rates from our older residents. So with that, I was not at all surprised to see this. Living situation, 94% said that they were homeowners, 5% said that they were renters, and again, very standard from what we would expect to see. Member of your household have a disability, only 11% answered yes to that, and then 26% indicated they had children in their home. 39% said they had members of their household that were age 65 or older. So this is just a little bit about who we were hearing from. Now let's get into the data. So what do you like best about living in Grand Chute? Location came through as the number one answer. So you will notice this adds up to more than 100%. If any of you can add up very quickly, that's because they were able to choose up to 3 options. So other things that came up here were things like a peaceful community, affordability, cost of living. I do want to note that the fact that there is that kind of that big drop there between that location and that peaceful community. So that location was definitely something that came through very strongly on these results. We also gave them an option to put in a free text response, and lower taxes, as you see, came through very loud and clear, along with the fact that it was rural. 19% said they grew up here, have family in the area. Also, park and rec areas came in. Pickleball came in as well as one of the things that they like. How important are the following to your quality of life? Public safety came in, and so this is just looking at essential. Public safety came in at essential at 88%. So that actually is pretty consistent with what we see with survey results. If you think about it, if you feel safe in your community, then you like where you live. So public safety often comes up pretty high. Affordability, cost of living coming up as well. Schools, you might wonder why we asked about schools. The reason why we ask about schools is because everyone is going to tell us anyway, and it's easier for us to analyze the data if we go ahead and ask it as part of the questions. If we don't, then that winds up being part of the free text responses, and it just makes it a little bit harder to analyze that data. So some of the other things that came up was neighborhood appearance, housing, and town services. So now we're gonna take another swipe at that data. We're gonna look at the things that are essential or somewhat important to quality of life. Now you're gonna look at public safety, look at that, we're at 97%. Again, very typical of what I would expect to see. Affordability, cost of living, again, typical of what I would expect to see. I'll let you guys kind of absorb this for a minute. Any questions about that? So how important are the following to the quality of life? Schools, if you recall, we had a lot of people who indicated that they were older, maybe senior citizens. That's probably why this may not be as important. I would also say probably employment opportunities. First of all, it's more of a bedroom community, and second of all, we're probably hearing a little bit more from the fact you have an older population. Public transportation, don't really know what that is. My guess is that it may be simply because it's not seen as being an issue here. It may be that you guys have got good options available for people to get around. How satisfied are you with the quality of the following services and features? So this is very satisfied. Again, we had a scale, and very satisfied was as high as you can go, 60%. Fire and emergency medical response, 59% police, 56% quality of life. I want to stop here for a second and say those are really nice response rates, or I should say scores. Give yourself a little pat on the back. So quality of life to be that high, I don't always see. Drinking water, I've got a lot of people who would be really, really happy to have drinking water at 50% very satisfied. And 40% parks and park facilities. Again, I have a lot of clients who'd be very happy to see that as well. Again, we're gonna take one more slice down. If you look at that now, I'm very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. You guys, in terms of quality of life, your residents are really happy with the quality of life that they have here. Give you just a second to go ahead and take a look at that. Do you have any questions about this? So I would be extremely happy with these scores. To have quality of life that high is pretty unusual. I do probably somewhere between 10 and 15 of these surveys a year. I've probably done 50 or 60 of them, in the last 3 or 4 years. So these are really nice scores on that. How satisfied are you with the quality of the following? Now we're gonna go with satisfied and somewhat dissatisfied and very dissatisfied. So with this, there's a couple of things here I wanna address real quick. Stormwater concerns, I tend to see pretty often. Historically, what we have seen is that a lot of communities have got older infrastructure. So this is not unusual. Now, that does not mean that that might not be something that you want to take a look at. This is where we're starting to look at potentially some strategic issues when we come back to kind of do that strategic planning. I also want to talk about roads. Roads is extremely common to have that be the one where the most people are somewhat or very dissatisfied. And there's a couple of things that play into that. As I mentioned, starting my career as a 911 dispatcher, we have got all of these different jurisdictions, right? We've got state, we've got county, and we've got the town. And sometimes there's confusion over who maintains which roads. So sometimes the town is getting credit for roads that aren't actually theirs. So that can be part of it. So does not mean that you should not pay attention to that information, but depending on the community, sometimes you guys may know that you guys are getting credit for some roads that are not yours. Any questions about that? So what are the three most important things for a strong and healthy community? Sense of safety and security. Again, that goes back to survey data for, 20 plus years all across the country. That is always the number one answer, and it makes sense. High quality town services, good street and highway system. And this is just kind of taking that next step down where we're looking at 16 to 19, actually 16 to 20% of the different things that were identified. But I do want you to note real quick, there's a big jump here. Safety and security was something definitely identified. Look at how high that number is. That's at 73%. Town services at 55%. So this is very much in order. Those top three are pretty significant. The rest of them, they're all pretty close together. Any questions about this? You will be getting a report of this report when I'm done, so you can go over this data at your leisure. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. What are the three most important things for a strong and healthy community? You can see it there, lower property taxes. Now, I will say this was not a lot of people who said this. Lower taxes, lower property taxes, that was actually a combined of 13 responses. So it's not like there was, 150 responses that said that. That was just 13. Housing came up with 4. Roads came up again, and then town spending. So how important are the following? Again, that safe community. Are you guys seeing this theme there? That, again, very consistent with what we see with national data. Good place to raise a family and affordable town services. Probably the one I would say here is a little bit newer is that good traffic flow. That's kind of the first time that we've really kind of heard about traffic flow. And again, now we're going to take that down one more step, and we're going to add in that essential and somewhat important. Safe community, just want to note that we are now up to 98% that are seeing that as essential or somewhat important. And we are now looking at affordable town services at 96%. So when we're thinking about strategic planning, we're going to be thinking about what to devote efforts and resources to. So it can be both things that we want to make sure that we maintain, but also some things that maybe we want to try and improve. So these are a couple of the slides. I already went ahead and showed you the other one. These are some other ones that you may want to pay attention to in preparation for that. Are there any questions? You guys are a quiet group. How much do you agree or disagree? We've got strongly agree. This is another one that I would pay attention to, providing, again, this is just strongly agree, which is out of a 5-point scale, this was the highest. Providing a safe and healthy environment is the highest priority. Again, we're asking about schools here simply because everyone will tell us anyway, so we want to make sure that we've got the data in a format that we can use it. Grand Chute's a good place to live for those of all ages. That's a little unusual. So the fact that, again, you've got 46% on that, give yourselves a pat on the back. I don't often see that. And then now we're just going to go ahead and kind of take that one more slice down. We're going to go ahead and do both strongly and some would agree. You certainly can. No, please. I'm hoping someone would ask a question, so thank you.
So when you say strongly agree, like, was this I don't, 1 to 5?
It was. Yep.
strongly agree would be 5, some would agree with 4.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Then there was neither agree nor disagree. Some would disagree, strongly disagree. That was what the scale was. Most of the questions had, I shouldn't say most of them, a fair number of the questions had don't know, depending on whether or not it was appropriate for the context of that question. So it was either a 5 or a 6-point scale. Yeah, please. Happy to answer questions, guys. So again, now we're going to go ahead and kind of go to the somewhat or strongly disagree. So this is another one to, as we're looking at strategic planning, to spend a little bit of time on, right? And I want to go ahead and give some context to some of these because, again, when we're looking at some of these, I have yet to see a community where everyone thinks that the local government is effective at communication. It is simply a challenge right now. It does not mean that we should not continue to put effort towards that, but I think that it is a continual challenge for local government. There's so much going on, and I think that it is just a challenge felt within local government at large. Town government being fiscally responsible with its resources, again, that is something that is pretty consistent, that some of the responses that I'm seeing, this is consistent with the responses that I'm seeing in other communities. And just for a little bit of context, I worked in 8 different states in 2025. So this is not just Illinois and not just Midwest information, but I was in states like Texas and Florida. This is pretty consistent to what we're seeing nationally. Yes, please.
Corey, how does the town having a good reputation rate with other communities?
So it all kind of depends on the community. Sometimes that is something that I see come up, I would say probably roughly half the time on this, where we're kind of pulling out that top 5, the ones that are over 15%. A lot of times if there has been challenges in the community, particularly if they've been challenges within the last 10 years, residents have long memories, right? Sometimes it isn't even something that is necessarily recent. It can be something that is longer term. I'm working with a community right now in Illinois where they had a staff member who instructed someone on their team to install a bathtub in their house, and it was like 12 years ago, and they're still kind of paying the price for it, right? They've really kind of tried to overcompensate for that, but again, there's that kind of that strong, those long memories. What I would say is that there are opportunities to really try and remedy that. A strategic plan can be a really good opportunity to do that. What people want to know is, what are you going to do? Did you do what you said you were going to do? How can you show us that you did? So a strategic plan can actually be a really nice opportunity to do that. Any other questions on this?
So where are we actually with that in regards to that reputation?
So you have
In
got,
your experience, where are we sitting based
So-
on other similar sized?
so I would say, and it's, I would say that probably about half of the communities that I work with, this is coming up on this slide. But let's go ahead and kind of back out for just a second, though, too, and talk about this. So I was working in 2020, I was working for POCO National Research Center. So we were getting in all of this data in 2020. And so we know historically that the highest level of trust, let me go the other way, the lowest level of trust was in federal government, more trust in the state government, and we had the highest trust in local government. We had really high trust in local government up until 2020. In 2020, literally we saw it was like coming off of a cliff. We saw the trust in local government. And there was a variety of reasons. 2020 was a challenging year for a variety of reasons. We have not seen those numbers go back up. So I think that when we see this, there's a variety of reasons for that, potentially. I think that sometimes it could be part of that 2020. We still have not seen those numbers go back up. This might be related to that. lack of trust that we know is still there. There can also be some things going on specifically within this community that is impacting those numbers. With that, those are things that this board, this council knows about. And so that I would say is some opportunities for us to be able to maybe talk about that a little bit further. There is, when we're talking about things like trust, there is no magic pill to suddenly make it better. But what there is again, being very consistent about things like communication and transparency. And if this is something that is a priority item for this body, that is certainly something that we can talk about as we go through this process. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to give you both an answer, but I'm also trying to give you context because I feel like sometimes the number without the context can be a challenge. And so I want to be able to give you both. Any other questions on this one?
Corey, context, the statement about the township prioritize equitable and inclusive community, and you had such a 12% strongly disagree. What's typically going through people's minds when you talk about equitable and inclusive?
So it's one of those things I think that there is, when we are going ahead and we are thinking about those words, I think that the meaning of those words is slowly changing. And so for some communities, that is really important. And in other communities, they may feel that it's just not something where they want to spend their resources, time, and financial. So again, that really is one of those things that is individual to a community. Other than that, I mean,
Do you normally see these types of responses or in that percentage form?
So you know what? It all depends on the community. So one of my other clients is Skokie, Illinois. Skokie is actually had the highest percentage of Holocaust victims outside of Israel after World War II. Skokie has a history of saying, if you're being persecuted, please come, you will be welcome here, right? I would never see a response like that in Skokie. But in other communities, this is very typical. And again, it really has to do with the community itself. Sometimes too, it has to do with the way that language is changing. I'm actually now, inclusive is not a word I'm actually using anymore in the survey. I'm actually using welcoming. Why? Because inclusive is now a word that has got some different connotations sitting here today in April of 26 than it did when we were going through and we were finalizing the language for this in June of 2025. So that can also have sometimes something to do with it as well. Language changes, and so sometimes that can impact as well. Any other questions on this one? All right, I'm going to keep going. Grand Chute Police Department. So one of the things that I was asked to do was to also go ahead and to evaluate the Grand Chute Police Department, to have some questions in there about them. So as part of accreditation, a police department often, actually, I believe is required to have a strategic plan. So we went ahead, since we were going to go ahead and do this anyway, we wanted to go ahead and get some information as well. So that's why we have some of these information here. I will say, because of the fact that this was having to do specifically with that effort, I don't necessarily have comparable information. However, just going ahead and eyeballing this, what I'm going to tell you is that anytime you have strongly agree over 50%, especially in this many categories, your police department is well regarded. Chief, did you get a chance to soak that all in? Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? All right, let me keep going. Again, you will get this at the end. And then again, this is just kind of that second swipe at the data where we're combining both the strongly and the somewhat agree. And if you look at this, again, 90%, right, feel safe in public spaces like parks, trails, and parking lots. I will tell you that is really, really high. I work in, I work in a lot of different communities. Appleton is also a community that I'm working with on their strategic plan. So I work with communities of all different sizes. People don't always feel safe in public spaces. So that is, I feel confident in saying, just based on focus groups, that is a very high number.
As a general question, I guess, how much of this, I mean, obviously this is vibes, right? This is how the town feels about itself. So like a couple miles away in Appleton, they're less feeling safe in public places, but they do feel safe here in public places.
I did not do a survey, so I don't want to make a comparison between the two.
You
No.
mentioned Appleton, so I just didn't know if that was something that you.
Yeah, no. But what I'm saying though is that when we're looking at data like this, again, I work in everything from largest communities like Appleton to, I believe my smallest one right now is 4,000. It's a community of 4,000. So wide variety. But this is something pretty unusual to feel safe in public spaces. A lot of times that can not feel, lighting, things like that. You're not seeing this in Appleton. Or I'm sorry, you're not seeing this in Grand Chute. You're seeing very high scores here. And especially I do want to draw out those last two. I trust the employees and Grand Chute police are viewed positively. Those are very high numbers. Any comments you wish to share? There were 209 total responses to this. I will be sharing all of those responses to you. Sometimes when we go through, we're asking because it's easier to kind of look at the data if you say, well, this is higher than that. But sometimes people have additional stuff that they want to share as too. So we'll go ahead and we'll send over all of those free text responses. A lot of it had to do with road repairs, road safety, taxes, trails and sidewalks, and then spending. Some were very specific and some were just kind of more general. There was nothing there that I think I would say is being particularly out of the ordinary. Any questions about the survey data, just as a whole? Is this what you expected to see?
I'm pretty happy with the results, actually.
The little word thing.
Yeah.
Immediate road tax. Is that we need to increase the taxes so we can pay for roads, or is that meant to be more like, because I know that these words are kind of taken out of several different coming together.
So when we do a word cloud, the largest word that you see just simply means that that's the word that came up the most often. So the fact that tax you see the most often, that came up because we were hearing things about having taxes cut. And there were some comments about special assessment tax to pay for roads. That was part of it. So that's part of the reason why you're seeing that tax is the biggest number, because we had it kind of in two categories, and then sometimes road was associated with that as well.
So they weren't all like cutting taxes. Some of them were like we needed maybe to raise some-ish.
Well, and it's one of those things. I would suggest that you go ahead and kind of look at all of the data, tying it together. Sometimes, it's one of those things where there's some balance, right? That's one of the challenges that you have as an elected body is there's only so much to do. There's budget, there's policy, and trying to figure out how to make all of that work together is one of the challenges that you have, and that's part of the reason why kind of going through and looking at, I like word clouds because it kind of gives you an idea, but it's also why I want to share those individual comments for you so you can actually take a look at those yourself and see the context of each of these comments. All right, and then There we go. How do you prefer to get information? Mailings is really high. But I would also say, if you think back to that first slide where we saw the demographics of those who answered this survey and the fact that we've got an older population who answered this, that is not overly surprising to me. Any questions about this part of it? All right. Any questions from staff? All right, I'm going to keep on going then. We also did focus groups. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of information about that. Those were done in September of 2025. We did multiple groups with that, including businesses, nonprofits, residents, and employees. So what's a focus group? It's a small group discussion done by a trained facilitators to gather in-depth information. So we had our 5-point scale, but sometimes we don't know the why behind it. So that's part of why we do focus groups. Focus groups ran for approximately 90 minutes, and they focused on some of the strengths and some of the challenges. So we go through and we gave you an idea with some of the, putting some things under some thematic categories. These were the general questions. Overall themes, Grand Chute has a strong regional role, high quality amenities and customer service, infrastructure and facilities that trying to keep pace is a little bit of a challenge. And then there's that stronger desire for internal alignment and that community identity. We're going to talk through this a little bit more, but branding was something that came up. So those key strengths, things like that strategic location with strong regional accessibility, amenity-rich community. Remember some of those things that we came back to with, we were looking at the survey results, but things like the parks, right? That's where you can kind of see some of those tie-ins. And again, specifically calling out those parks and rec facilities, those positive perceptions of town staff and facilities. Convenient access to highways, airport and employment centers. Remember that survey data, we're talking about location being one of the things that people liked the best. So sometimes it's helpful to really kind of think through that survey data because this kind of gives you some more of the detail as to why some of that came up. And then that strong reputation, I would also point out, is a clean, safe, growing community. And again, that really ties in so well with so many of the themes that we've seen so far in that survey data. Parks, housing, and public services. I'm not going to read through all of this for you, but you know, certainly those parks are well regarded. Also, as we've already seen, those positive views of the police and fire departments, and also that strong customer service from the town employees. Some of the challenges that were identified. Transportation and connectivity gaps. So you might recall that was actually, we've got a little bit of a discrepancy there between what we saw in the survey data and what we saw in the focus groups. So sometimes it's helpful just to think about the fact that who did we have in the focus groups? We had staff, we had a couple of residents, and we also had businesses. So that might be part of it. And again, thinking through, we had some older, we kind of skewed towards some older residents in that were answering that survey. So aging facility and infrastructure capacity constraints was pretty consistent through. Some challenges in terms of staffing and coordination, and then public safety pressures linked to commercial density. Some other things having to do with connectivity, trails, gaps in bike lanes and connected routes, some safety concerns, and then some traffic congestion. Town facilities. This is something that I hear about a lot right now. If you think about a lot of our buildings, they were built for very different times than what we have. Very different needs. We think about our technology needs now. It's very different than a lot of times what our buildings were built for. Police in particular, what we need now in terms of interview rooms and things like that, those needs have really changed in terms of the way we use space. One of the interesting ones for this community that have heavy non-resident traffic was identified. And then that perception that road investment lags behind community expectations. So we're talking about internal capacity. Staff sometimes feel like they have expertise that could potentially be used better. There's outsourcers versus in-house services, and there's some confusion around there. And then things, some concerns about things like reckless driving, drugs, and trafficking. I would say that is pretty consistent with some of the things that I hear about. So opportunities, community building, amenities, and gathering spaces. It's very interesting, as this is something that we are seeing right now that's coming out in a variety of different places. There's a lot of talk right now about third places. So first and second places are home and work, but a third place where people can get together and be able to have some connections. So that was some of the stuff that we were kind of hearing about, is that kind of gathering spaces. A mix of locally owned neighborhood businesses. Everybody wants to have the stuff that's owned by people who live in the community. And that's something I see consistently among communities. Clear communication about community successes and identity. Again, that communication component to it. And then just some stability.
Can you go back to the 2 slides before that?
I would love to,
The
yes.
last one, concerns regarding reckless driving, drugs, and trafficking. Is this a societal problem or a Grand Chute problem?
No, I think, so what I would say is that when you are on a residential street and you have kids, it can feel like people are driving through real fast, or you're walking. It feels like people are driving through real fast. And sometimes it can be that they are, right? But I think that that's one of those things that, particularly in a community with a lot of, that's primarily residential, that is something that I tend to hear about. So we're talking about reckless. It really has more to do with speeding, those types of things. Drugs, I think, is just something, there's just a lot of concerns about that.
Okay, thanks.
Again, desire for those place-based community events. We are seeing this, and this is mirroring some national trends that we're seeing. People want places, again, to be able to connect. And so you're very much seeing this in the data that I'm presenting right now. Any questions, any comments? Okay. I'm going to keep going. Opportunities then, things like being able to strengthen interdepartmental coordination. Local government is by nature very siloed. And that's something that we'll be kind of talking about. I came up as a 911 dispatcher. When you have an emergency in progress, you have to know who's in charge, because they have to let everybody else know what it is that they're going to do. We have always tended in local government to be siloed. And so that's one of the real challenges, not just for Grand Chute, but for local government in general, is to really break down those silos. I think technology is really giving us, though, some opportunities there. Any questions about this slide? Okay. So some of the future vision and strategic questions, things like what defines Grand Chute's community identity, right? How do we balance growth with cohesion and livability? Those are some big questions to ask, right? Because there's this feeling of this being a town, but at the same time, though, there's also the need for growth. How do we balance that? Service level expectations are always a challenge. Commercial areas, along with community identity, and then that long-term vision. So some of the things that we're seeing as some opportunities for investment by the focus groups, I'll go ahead and let you see what their perspectives were.
In your report, Corey, do you separate out comments from staff versus comments from residents' businesses?
I have to go back. It's been a while since we drafted. I have to go back and look. But I certainly can go through and do that. So I'm always hesitant to do that. But in this case, we had 2 groups of staff and 2 groups of residents. So I can do that and be able to maintain confidentiality. As we always want to make sure that we do that with focus groups, is be able to maintain confidentiality. But I should be able to do that.
Some of them it's easy to pick out, obviously, but some
Yeah.
of them it's a little.
Sure. No, absolutely. Yeah, I can go ahead and do that. And so in conclusion, those are some of the universal themes that we saw. Things like there's pride in community, quality, safety, and location. Frustration with some of the infrastructure. There's that desire for some internal alignment, leadership, concern about that long-term identity and cohesion. There was actually some comments in there about things like maybe some branding. And then recognition of increasing service and safety demands. And some of those insights, and I'll go ahead and kind of let you read through those, but, you're at a real key point right now in your trajectory as a community. And you have a real opportunity with the strategic plan. We're going to be looking at where we are now. We're going to be looking at somewhere between 3 to 5 years in the future. What does success look like? And how do we measure our progress towards that? So that will be the rest of what I will be coming back to work with all of you on. So, and then with that, aligning vision, governance, and service expectations, infrastructure, internal culture and leadership stability, those community-centered places and experiences, and then clearly defining and communicating Grand Chute's identity. Any questions for me? I will be sending all of this information to you so that you can look at it at your leisure. What some of the next steps look like. We all get to hang out for a while tomorrow. That will be fun. So do expect that you will be up and walking around. I'm not normally one for presentation. This is the only heavy presentation interaction that you will have with me. Most of the other stuff that we will be doing together is going to be a lot of large group work, small group work, a little bit of presentation. This is kind of the anomaly, but I have a lot of information to give you. So tomorrow is going to be us going ahead and doing that. And then going forward, we're going to be really kind of talking through what do you see as some of the priorities? Where should we be focusing efforts and resources going forward? So hopefully this has given you some really good stuff to really kind of think through. I am available if you have any other questions. Again, I'll see you guys tomorrow, but also going forward. With that, any other questions while I'm here? All right. I have now come to do what I wanted to do. So with that, I appreciate your time and your attention, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the morning.
Are you expecting some follow-up meetings with this entire group after tomorrow's date?
Yes. So I always do one-on-one interviews just to get to know everybody a little bit better. I had to cancel one, and I apologize for that. I had something that was unexpected I had to take care of. But it's just 15 minutes, 20 minutes of your life, but it's also fun. So we'll go ahead and do that tomorrow. And then we will be doing going forward later as we prepare for the retreat. There will be everyone who attends the retreat. We will be doing prior to that. We will be doing a survey where you actually identify what you think are some strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And there's some prompts in there, but it gives you a chance to really kind of think through prior to going into that retreat. Again, so get your perspectives on Grand Chute. And we'll be doing that with any staff that are attending as well.
Anything else?
All right. Was this what you guys thought that you were going to see? I just, out of curiosity, any reactions to this?
I think this stuff is great. I love this kind of data. It's invaluable to me.
Excellent. And I will be sending out reports and you will have all of this to look at. So this is not the last time you'll see this information. You will be able to look at it and really dig into it if you'd like.
Can you reiterate for us again, what expectations you had for survey results and focus group participations, and how did we meet that?
Yeah, so we set up the focus groups. I believe, did you help with that? So we had staff who was going ahead and doing that, I believe, and it's been a while, which is the reason why I'm looking behind me, because I don't remember. We did do a fair amount of staff. I could go ahead and check the numbers on the number of staff that we had, but because we did not do an internal survey, so we always have the question of whether or not to do an internal survey when we're talking about staff. Because of the limited number of staff that you had, focus groups are actually a better way to collect data with the size of staff that you had. That's why we did not do an internal survey. So we went ahead and we did that. We had the 2 groups of residents. Those were pretty well attended. And then the group of businesses and also nonprofits. And then I would have to go way back to the beginning, but I was actually very happy with the number of, responses that you had to your survey. Yeah, you guys had 727 total responses. So let's talk that through for a minute. So when this is not a statistically valid survey, we did not go through and reweight it. But when we're talking about surveys, we like to see, for a statistically valid survey, usually between 400 and 450. You guys blew that out of the water. So what we saw from this was...
Per percentage of population?
It does not. No, it's a statistical thing, like who knew, and I'm not brilliant enough to know the math behind it. I do not have PhD behind my name. But for whatever reason, between 400 and 450 works almost all the time. So that really is kind of the rule of thumb, is between 400 and 450. And with 727, you guys blew that out of the water. So it was very well responded to. One of the things that I do on the back end is I take a look at the data. So periodically, we have some things that are happening in the environment. I was working in a community, and it wasn't even in the community itself. It was happening in the county, but they were going to cut down 100-year-old oak trees. And so the question was, were people going to try and use the survey to influence whether or not these oak trees were being cut down? So one of the things that I'm looking for on the back end is any sort of indication that there's an attempt to sway the data. And it didn't see anything like that when I did it. Am I gonna promise you that all 727 are original responses? No, because somebody may say, did I take the survey? I'm not sure if I did. I'm gonna go ahead and take it again, right? But I did not see anything that looked like a concerted effort to sway the survey one way or another. And I check it in a variety of different ways. Your response rate was really good.
So that 727, is that individual survey results that you got back? The focus group numbers of people aren't included in that?
That is not including focus groups, no.
Although they could have done
Yeah,
a
and
separate
yes,
survey, and then they'd be included in that number.
yes, that is correct. Yes, you guys had a very nice response to the survey. And my apologies, I should have started there at the beginning. But yeah, you guys had a very robust response rate.
She was also explaining that the behavior of focus groups is different than individual surveys, and that's why she likes focus groups with the individuals, because they behave differently.
Yeah.
As
Part of when we're doing things with focus groups, a lot of it is really being able to understand the why behind it. So when we get a question, a lot of times we'll follow up with, oh, so can you help us understand that a little bit more, right? You can kind of dig into that a little bit more. So when you're seeing something that maybe seems a little bit inconsistent, or you're just curious, you can dig into that a little bit more. Obviously, you can't do that with a survey, but that's part of the reason why you like to, technically, the technical terms are to pair quantitative survey data with qualitative, things like a focus group, so you get both. But again, I would say you do have those 209, I believe, of those free text responses. Some of them are going to be longer than others, but that's also that opportunity to see what people had to say in addition to, indicating whether they were, strongly agree, some would agree. So they answered those in both ways. Any other questions for me?
Sounds good.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
absolutely. My pleasure, my pleasure.
So do I want to have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your presentation and for your work, and we'll see you in the morning.
Sounds good, thank you.